welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back to that same old place that you laughed about. Well, the names have all changed since you hung around, but those dreams have remained and they've turned around. Who'd have thought they'd lead you? Who'd have thought they'd lead you? Back here where we need you. Back here where we need you. Yeah, we tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. 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 We always could spot it. Welcome back. And I smile when I think how it must have been. And I know what a scene you were learning in. Was there something that made you come back again? And what could ever lead you? What could ever lead you? Back here where we need you. Back here where we need you. Yeah, we tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. And I know what a scene you were learning in. Was there something that made you come back again? And what could ever lead you? What could ever lead you? Back here where we need you. Back here where we need you. Yeah, we tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Yeah, we tease him a lot. Welcome back. Welcome back. 'Cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Yeah, we tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. 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 Welcome back.
Good morning, Rochester City School District. Welcome back to the 2021 school year. We are excited to have everyone here for Rochester City School District's first virtual Superintendents Conference Day. Today will be a district-based, and tomorrow will be district-based. Thursday and Friday will be building-based Superintendents Conference Days. We are excited, and we are extremely wanting to let you know that this 2 days are full of information and great professional development that you will be receiving. We are asking that you follow your schedule on day 2 to make sure that you are attending the specific professional development that has been designed for you. Your attendance will be required by submission of the survey. A separate link will be sent out to you today in a link format from the communication department. So please be sure to check your emails today for a separate link if you cannot access it through the landing page for you to complete for today's survey. We are also asking that you will please show the time to come into your Zoom sessions on day 2 at least 10 minutes prior to, so that you can be allowed into the session for your professional development. So please log in at least 10 minutes prior to the start of your sessions. Each session will start promptly today and tomorrow, so we're asking that you make sure that you are on time. We are also excited to present to you our very own Superintendent, Dr. Leslie Myers, who will start off this conference for you, and enjoy your professional development.
Thank you, Severia, and good morning to everyone. I can't tell you how honored and pleased I am to serve as your superintendent of schools. This is an exciting day for me, and I certainly hope it's an exciting day for you. This morning, I want to just talk a little bit about where we are and where we are headed. So we'll talk a little bit about our strategic plan. We'll talk about our finances. We'll acknowledge some individuals. And then I'll turn it over to Mike Schmidt, our Chief of Operations. But before we begin, I think it's so important for you to get to know me a little bit. Some of you know me when I worked here previously in the district at Marshall my first year, and then at Wilson the rest of the time, Wilson Magnet High School. But many of you don't know me. So I thought it might be nice to just quickly do a activity I call Getting to Know Me by the Numbers. And I wanted to introduce myself that way. The picture that you see before you is my late father, Dr. Earl T. Myers. This was, I imagine, around Father's Day, his first father. So he was looking at the future, Dr. Myers. But I want to talk to you about myself and have you get to know me through the numbers. So I was born on May 15th, 1969 in Concord, Massachusetts. I was the first child of color ever born in the hospital, and it was really this mystery, and there was a lot of excitement for me to come into this world. So I was very warmly welcomed into this world on my very first, on my birthday. And so we lived in Stowe, Massachusetts, which is right next to Concord. And we were one of the only few families of color, African-American families in the neighborhood. So 4.783 years later, from 1969, I had my first encounter with racism. I went across the street to get our mail, and my neighbor, an older woman, actually sicked 3 pedigree Doberman pinchers on me, and she said, "Go get that N-word." And so unfortunately, at a very young age, I was introduced to racism and the fact that there would be individuals who would judge me on the color of my skin rather than the content of my character. A couple years after that, we moved to the Rochester area, Pittsford specifically, and I went to elementary school and then transitioned to junior high school. But at 11, unfortunately, my dad made the decision that he didn't want to be married to my mom anymore. And so my parents separated. And that was a very difficult time because literally overnight we went from being in a very affluent household to going on public assistance. And that situation really rooted and grounded both my sister, who's 4.5 years younger than me, and myself. It was very humbling. But I am looking back on that time, I am very grateful that that experience happened because it really began to shape who I was as an individual. I went through junior high school and graduated from high school and received almost a full scholarship to go to the University of Rochester, so right around the corner from central office. And it was there that it was the first time that I really got away from home and experienced life. But about 3 months into my freshman year, and there are some of my colleagues who actually went to college with me who work in Rochester City School District, another encounter with racism where some of my classmates decided to carve the word NIGG, and that's where I ran into them into the plexiglass on a vending machine. And so again, confronting issues of race and racism and dealing with that. I went through the rest of that school year and ended up graduating. You'll see at 22.5 years. I did play around my freshman year a little bit, so I needed to get some additional credits. Graduated from the University of Rochester and went right on to the Warner School to earn my degree in school counseling. And I shared with you in the opening video when I first met you and was appointed that I did my internship right here at Rochester City School District. On 7/1/93, I began working for the Rochester City School District, and that was my entrance into the professional world of education. And it was very, very exciting. So I was at Marshall, then I transitioned to Wilson Magnet High School under the leadership of Suzanne Johnston, and just so enjoyed working in the Rochester City School District. I went on to earn my administrative degree and then worked as an administrator for another year and a half, and then transitioned to the Greece Central School District. You'll see the next date, 11/27 p.m. 2003. That's when my father, Dr. Earl Myers, took his last breath. And we had reconciled and had a very positive and healthy relationship. But I believe my father's legacy of advocacy and standing up for things that he strongly believed in, that torch got passed to me at that time, with me being the oldest. And I was there to witness him transitioning from this life to the next. So I worked in Greece, and then on July 1st, 2007, I transitioned to the Ithaca City School District. Probably a month or two after being on the job, lots of civil unrest, protesting. Lots of unhappiness with the district and the treatment of Black and brown children. And so I led those efforts very significantly there. So worked as an assistant services and enjoyed that. I had the opportunity to come back home on July 1st, 2012, and became the first woman of color to be appointed as superintendent in the Brockport Central School District. I loved and enjoyed that role very significantly, and I certainly thank those who really paved the way, to Dr. Alice Holloway Young and Loretta, Cameron's mother, who really paved the way for me to be able to take the lead as the first permanent woman of color to be a superintendent in Monroe County. So I did that role for almost 8 years and loved it. You'll see the next by the numbers, 28.38 / -81. Those are the coordinates for Disney World down in Florida. And it was during that time when I was huffing and puffing and trying to catch up with my then fiance, who's now my husband, that I just was so out of shape. And so I decided to make the commitment to get healthy. And I did, and I lost 60 pounds naturally by just eating healthy, eating clean, and working out. Shortly after that, on December 29th, 2018, I married the love of my life, Randy Stephen Small, and we are looking forward to celebrating our 2nd year anniversary this December. Fast forward to March 13th, Friday the 13th, 2020. That was the last time that we were all able to congregate together as a team in Rochester City School District. It's the last time that we saw most of our students. It's the last time that we saw each other. And it was a very difficult time. We know, unfortunately, also about 2 weeks after that, there was an incident in Rochester where a gentleman by the name of Mr. Prude, unfortunately, was detained and lost his life 7 days later after being detained. And we're experiencing the residue of that in Rochester with protesting, and we're on night 6. On May 2020, certainly George Floyd was murdered during that time, and we saw protesting again in Rochester about that, folks being upset about that. But I also was appointed as superintendent in the Rochester City School District. And so I've been here for a few months and I'm really enjoying that. And now we're in September 2020. We still continue to live through a pandemic. We have made the decision to open virtually, and we will greet our students on September 14th, very shortly, in another less than a week. But we also know that there's civil unrest in our city. We're on day 6. And I just want to reiterate that the words cannot express the sadness and hurt that I am feeling this morning about the death of Daniel Prude and the civic unrest that exists in our community. I've seen where many of our staff and our students are out there protesting and rallying for civic for their rights and to talk about their discontentment with what's going on. I want folks to know that we have supports that are available. Please, if this is impacting you, or if you see any students, we have lots of resources. You can go to the website. We have a special information page that's dedicated on our website. And we just want to make sure that we are taking care of each other and taking care of our students, even in a virtual environment. As we move forward to see if we can reopen to a hybrid model, we're going to continue to monitor key indicators, including the number of cases, testing capacity, and indication of community spread as we move forward. We're going to reevaluate remote learning through the first 10 weeks of school, and we'll make a decision prior to mid-October, about 2 to 3 weeks prior. We continue to work with Monroe County Health Department on contact tracing and testing, and the goal is to return November 16th if and when it's safe to do so. So that's just me by the numbers and just a little bit of update of where we are. Our theme, as you know, is Forward Together Now. And I chose that because we did have a rough last year. The 1920 school year was very difficult for many reasons, both obvious and maybe not so obvious. Certainly significant financial and budget issues. There was the departure of the superintendent during the school year, and there was also very significant layoffs. And so I know that it was very, very difficult, and I saw how that unfolded, being not the time and then in the state education department. But the goal is really for us to move forward and to be as positive and just to gain some momentum. We need to work together. There are many challenges that we need to continue to work through, and we need to do that in a collaborative and open manner, and we need to do it now and not look back. So what are some things as far as moving forward? One of my favorite sayings is Caesarea in Gera, and it means, and how are the children? September 14th does mark a new beginning in the Rochester City School District. We've never opened virtually, and we are doing so. I am so proud to be a part of the Rochester City School District team, and I am committed to walking down this unprecedented time on this path together with you. And the bottom line is that we are going to ensure that high quality learning certainly takes place for not all of our students, but each student in the Rochester City School District. So as Severia pointed out, we will be in district-based professional development today and tomorrow, and then it will be building-based on the 10th and 11th. Get lots of rest, and then we'll gear up on the 14th to greet our students virtually. So as we talk about the current state of financial affairs, we do need to look at how we can try and make up for the budget shortfall because of the 20%, as well as just some previous things that were not balanced relative to our budget. So we're looking at budget reductions for all departments and schools, and it's important. That doesn't necessarily mean staff layoffs. It means looking at things as far away from the classroom as we can, and we're doing everything we can to really not have that be. And so that means everyone needs to look at that 20% budget reduction, freezing certain areas in the budget, and we really want to ensure that it is minimal impact, again, on students and staff. And so our CFO, Carlene Pierce, will be sending out a memo that asks us to ask ourselves some questions relative to the budget. And so I won't go through all of that because of time, but it really just focuses on working collaboratively to best meet and support the needs of our student, and really making sure that we are being very purposeful with our budget. Now, many of you ask, well, how can I advocate, or how can I articulate my concern with the federal and state government? Each one of your unions have have sent out, I know at least some have sent out information, and so please make sure that you refer to that, but writing and emailing and tweeting different folks is certainly going to help articulate and advocate. I know our Board of Education is doing that. I'm doing that. Our cabinet is doing that. So we are working incredibly hard to advocate on behalf of the district. So together, let's talk just a little bit about our strategic plan. There was a group of a little under 30 that met over the summer, and it was very targeted and purposeful work. And we worked to create a draft strategic plan that will go before the board for final approval at the end of this month. It all started, though, with the areas of focus that you see listed, and that's everything from academics to multilingual learners. We know that we need to continue to move the academic needle in a positive way relative to academics. I talked about we've got to address our budget and finances and ensuring that we are fiscally responsible and balancing our budget. I'm going to continue to work on branding and making sure that people understand, both internal and external stakeholders, the great things that are going on in the Rochester City School District. We obviously are in the midst of COVID-19 planning. We'll continue to focus on trauma-informed practices and ensuring that both our students, our staff, and our families have the resources that they need. We're going to work on professional development relative to implicit bias, anti-racism, inclusion, diversity. Special education will continue to widen the continuum of services for our students and also have a focus on our multilingual learners. So you can see that we have a mission and a vision that really focuses on students being this focal point of our attention. And then really our vision, our aspiration that that our students would have the access to high quality education and each student would graduate as a productive member of society. We have core beliefs, and again, you can see these, and we'll be sending the information out and getting this out once it's been approved. But you see that first core belief, which is so important to me, and I know it's important to each of you, and that is that students are our first priority, and they're going to drive every single decision that we make in the Rochester City School District. You can see the next set of core beliefs of making sure that we provide a high quality learning, that it's safe, it's loving and rigorous, that we continue to partner with families, the school, and the community, and that we are fiscally responsible. Our priorities are about high quality learning for each of our students, lifting up, ensuring an inclusive, caring, and safe learning environment, building community, and fostering dynamic leadership. So all of those are areas of focus that we will be, those are our paths to get us to where we need to get. As far as performance trends and targets, we will be focusing on the following: graduation rate, 3 through 8 math and ELA proficiency. We're going to look at chronic absenteeism. We'll have a focus on students with disabilities and the least restrictive environment. We'll also have an ELL performance target. We'll make sure that we are continuing to move our schools from receivership to CSI, TSI to schools in good standing. Have all 60 of our schools in good standing and employing restorative practices. Mercedes, if you'll go to the welcome slide. So I want to certainly, I know that I'm new and that there are other folks that are new to the district since we last had our opening day last September. I want to welcome all those who are new to Rochester City School District. So if you are new, give a shout out and put in the chat that this is your first year with the Rochester City School District. And I want to welcome you to our school district, and I'm looking forward to eventually meeting you in person and us making a connection in your classroom, in your office, and where you work. We also, I would be remiss if we didn't honor years of service in the Rochester City School District. We started with 30, and so congratulations to all those who have had 30 years of service. We thank you, and we appreciate all that you've done on behalf of students and staff and their families. We also want to recognize 35 years of service and thank you for your service in the Rochester City School District. And we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge 40 years of service to the Rochester City School District. And I have to give a shout out to Joe Baldino, who I worked with my first year at Wilson, and he actually was my sister's internship supervisor for her student placement. So congratulations, Joe, Karen, and Kent. So congratulations to all those who have milestone years in the district. So that is Rochester City School District in a nutshell. I will come to you. I try to get a video message out to you every Friday to give you updates, or a member of my cabinet will update you. So we'll continue to update you. The goal is to be open and transparent with what we're doing to make sure that you as a Rochester City School District member is in the loop. I'm trying to make sure that you hear from me or you hear from our staff before you hear it on social media or before you hear that in the news, either in the newspaper or on television. So that is really the goal, is to make sure that we get information out. Who I am in a nutshell, just to summarize, I'm a wife to Randy Stephen Small. I'm an aunt to Jalen Arkell Earl Dickey, who's starting kindergarten today in the Webster Central School District. I'm a stepmom to Chelsea and Chandler, who live in the Chicago area. I'm a friend to sisters in the community. I'm the daughter, the proud daughter of Clara Alice Mills Myers. I'm a community member, and I'm a friend to lots of women in the community. I'm mentored by folks like Dr. Alice Holloway Young, who I've learned so much from, and just really sat into her pearls and words of wisdom. I'm a thought partner and a colleague to Dr. Sean Nelms, who I'd like to give a shout out to, the superintendent for the East EPO. I'm a former school counselor to Xavier and Danielle and Khadijah, who are all former students of mine. And Khadijah actually oversees the Office of Parent Engagement, so a shout out to her. And I'm a sister, biological sister to Linda Dickey, who is an educator and serving students in the parochial school world. And so I have to reiterate my honor to be your superintendent. And this is one of my favorite quotes. I only have a handful, but the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy." And we know that it is difficult right now. Our community is in an uproar. We've got turmoil right around the corner from central office. We have financial challenges that we need to overcome, but I'm a firm believer that a challenge is the flip side of an opportunity. And we just have uncharted territory being in a remote environment starting. But I just stand before you virtually saying that I am here to support you. I'm here to represent the district with integrity. And I want to wish you the best of a start to a school year. And I am so looking forward to the time when I can see you in person and come into your classroom or come into your office and greet you at that time. Thank you so much. And I hope that the next 4 days certainly are very enriching and inspiring and helpful to get you prepared for September 14th. I would now like to transition this time and express my gratitude to Mike Schmidt, AKA Schmitty, who is our next speaker, and will go over information from his respective area. Thank you, and take care, everyone. Have a great, inspiring, wonderful, awe-filled year. Take care.
Good morning, everyone, and certainly a special thank you to Dr. Myers Small. I don't believe anybody has come into a superintendency with this level of challenges, and she has been absolutely incredible to work with, and really led us through some very difficult times in her short tenure here, and we very much look forward to the future. I want to first begin by recognizing some very special people. My teams from our facilities, food service, safety and security, and transportation. They have been on point here since March 16th, since the first day of our COVID crisis, and they have been working daily to distribute meals, make sure our facilities are safe and secure, and also making sure that we deliver food to families that are in need. It's just an incredible effort that from all the individuals on those teams, and as a community, we cannot thank them enough. And as the chief of operations, I'm forever in their debt. Today, our presentation is going to focus on safety and operations for the opening of school. My pops always said, "Don't look in the rearview mirror; it's time to look forward." It is with great privilege this morning that I introduce three incredibly dedicated professionals: Stacy Darby, our coordinator of environmental health and safety; Aaron Groutman, our coordinator of school health services; and Anelli Nathaniel Rivera, our director of employee benefits. They are going to go through the protocols and procedures as we open school, with our focus being certainly on safety. There are many opportunities to participate in the presentation. You can put your questions in the chat area, and if we don't happen to answer your questions during this time block, we will make sure and send out those documentations later on in the week. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy Darby, and thank you everyone for all your support.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is health and safety and what it would look like in our hybrid environment. And the reason why I'm going to take the time to do that today is because we have everyone here together and we can talk about what some of those things will look like. This will be refined as more details come out from the Department of Health and we learn more as we go along with the pandemic. But I did want to take some time to talk about some of our plan when we would return to a hybrid session. And even coming in at any time during the remote learning session, our focus is still going to be on social distance, hand hygiene, and cleaning and disinfection. With social distance, that means 6 feet of space in all directions, proper use of face covers, washing hands with soap and water, or use of an alcohol-based hand sanitizer, and then frequent touched surfaces. I'm going to talk more about that in some detail. Our student safety and staff safety portion of the plan is detailed on our website. I'm going to talk again more specifically about some of those details right now. So with social distancing, if you've been anywhere since this started, people are familiar with social distancing. 6 feet of space is required in all directions. If an activity absolutely requires a closer interaction among adults, a face cover must be worn whenever 6 feet of space cannot be maintained. Whenever possible, a physical barrier can be used instead of a face cover. When we're talking about some of our different academic courses, 12 feet of space is required in PE, music, or singing and band. And again, more details of that can be found in our plan. Whenever a shared space is used by multiple groups, we have to be careful to make sure we have on face covers, maintain social distance. Whenever it can be avoided, we do that as well. And I'm not talking about a classroom or something like that, but putting multiple people in the same place at the same time. If a shared space is used, it has to be disinfected between the groups, so that someplace like an art room comes to mind. If we're going to send children to an art room, we would have to disinfect in between each class that went there. And that's not necessarily the plan to do that. I just wanted to give that as an example. Face covers have to be worn in all shared spaces unless eating or drinking is taking place and 6 feet of space is maintained. We want to make sure that hand hygiene is performed before and after using any shared space. When we talk about the use of face covers, we want to make sure that they're worn absolutely at all times in all shared spaces like hallways, restrooms, buses, copy rooms, mail rooms. Whenever 6 feet of space is not available, they also have to be worn at all times. We are going to have a more detailed face cover plan based on current Department of Health requirements prior to any opening of hybrid learning. But I just want to talk a little bit more about the proper wear as well. They have to be made of cloth or they can be disposable. They have to cover the nose and mouth, and that's very important The nose is part of our respiratory system, and a face cover must absolutely cover the nose and mouth. A face shield cannot be worn instead of a face cover. In the guidelines that were given to us by the Department of Health and SED, face shields are not an acceptable face cover inside of school buildings. Excuse me. When you're removing and storing your face cover, you want to make sure not to touch your eyes, nose, or mouth. Be sure not to touch the outside of the face when you're of the face cover when you're removing it. Use the straps to remove it. If possible, wash your hands for 20 seconds after removing that face cover. And if you don't have soap and water available, you're going to want to use hand sanitizer. As soon as you can, washing your hands with soap and water is always better than just using hand sanitizer alone. Store the face cover safely when not wearing. Make sure that the inside, the face side, doesn't touch surfaces. You don't want that to be on top of something that you might potentially pick up any type of germs. If you're wearing a cloth face cover, the CDC recommendation is that it's washed daily. You want to wash it in a washing machine and using a dryer if possible. If you don't have a washing machine or dryer available, you can also hand wash them in a bleach solution of 4 teaspoons of bleach in a quart of water. Let it soak for 5 minutes. Make sure to rinse it well and make sure to wash your hands after. You want to make sure the face cover is completely dry before wearing. Some questions, as I've done this training for other groups, have been, well, what if someone doesn't wash their face cover? Will that impact me? And it won't. It only impacts the person that's wearing it. Disposable face covers must be replaced whenever they become soiled, whenever they get wet, if the elastic breaks. Make sure you place any disposable face coverings in the trash. We don't want to see them all over the ground or in the hallways or outside. Staff will be provided by staff is going to be provided with a cloth face cover by the district. Students will be provided with a face cover once they come in hybrid if they don't have one. And that would be at the first point that we make contact with the students. So if they're taking a bus, they would be provided with a face cover on the bus. If they're coming to the building, they would be provided with one at the building. You can wear your own face cover, again, as long as it covers your mouth and nose. You do not have to wear the one that the district provides. Encourage students, and honestly you guys as well, to have more than one face cover with you for the day. I've been here and I know that sometimes I change mine out and it's just more comfortable to have the ability to change that face cover out throughout the day. Also, if someone sneezed or coughed or it got wet somehow, you'd want to have another face cover available. So this is a little bit of information. If there are students that are medically incapable of wearing a face cover, they need a note from their physician, and the district would have to create a plan for that student to still receive their education. We would work with that student to make sure that they're in a location where 6 feet is always maintained. If there was ever a situation where a staff member had to get within 6 feet of a student without a face cover, they would be provided with additional personal protective equipment. Face cover breaks, and again, this is more for our hybrid situation. We are encouraging face cover wear as much as possible. Again, we're going to have a more specific plan in place based on guidance that's available at that time. When a break is given, breaks must be given still, and when they are given, 6 feet of space has to be available in all directions, or a physical barrier could be in place. Breaks should be short in duration, and they can of course be removed to eat and drink. Again, provided that 6 feet of space in all directions or that physical barrier. Additional PPE that may be provided, personal protective equipment based on specific job assignments or the hazard, could be gloves, face shields, goggles. Hand hygiene is incredibly important. It's incredibly important all the time, but even more so now. We want to make sure that when you're washing your hands, you're spending 20 seconds, getting the tops, bottoms, fingertips in between. Young students should be supervised when they're washing their hands to make sure they're doing it the correct way. Hand sanitizer use, it must be a alcohol-based hand sanitizer. You want to apply enough hand sanitizer to coat your hands. Rub your hands together until the hand sanitizer is dry. Hand sanitizer cannot be used on visibly dirty hands. Young students must be supervised when using hand sanitizer. Hand hygiene. There's a whole list here of when you should clean your hands, but basically any time that you think to yourself, when was the last time I cleaned my hands, is a good time to clean your hands. Again, entering the building or entering a classroom, after using any shared object, before and after snacks and lunch, after using the bathroom, after helping a student with toileting. If you sneeze, have to blow your nose, you accidentally cough into your hands, even with a face cover on, if you cough into your hands, you still need to wash your hands afterwards upon coming in from indoors and anytime hands are visibly soiled. Cleaning and disinfection will take place in all occupied areas of the buildings. Cleaning will be a little bit different when we're in remote as opposed to hybrid. I am going to go through both situations. The disinfectants that we use are on the EPA list N. This is a little bit of information for you as well. If you're buying a disinfectant for your home, you want to make sure that that is on that list as well. You also, when you look at that list, there's something called the contact time, and that's how long a disinfectant has to make contact with the surface to make sure that it is killing whatever you want it to kill. And on this list, which is linkable from this from this slide presentation, you can see that time there. So you want to make sure that that surface stays wet for that entire time. Students will not be allowed to use disinfectants and should not immediately be present when disinfectants are in use whenever possible. So this is our general guidelines for the meeting, these are general guidelines for hybrid, a hybrid situation when we have students and staff in the building. The school-based custodial staff assigned to the building will perform the following cleaning tasks nightly, which look a lot like our regular cleaning, with the addition of mopping with a disinfectant nightly. Additional staff reassigned from secondary school facilities, and again, this would be if we went with the original hybrid model, pre-K through 4. All of these tasks would be done nightly, and these are frequently touched surfaces. And then our day shift custodians would also be doing the following tasks throughout their shift, which includes cleaning common areas, cleaning all the high touch surfaces, cleaning restrooms, and cleaning and disinfecting any area of the building upon staff request. It may be necessary for adults and kids even to share frequently used high touched items. They must be disinfected in between. So an example of that would be with adults, a photocopier. We wouldn't disinfect a photocopier. We would actually disinfect our hands before and after, because using a disinfectant on a photocopier frequently could lead it to no longer working properly. Another example would be if you're using a microwave. You'd want to clean the surface of that microwave and disinfect it before you used it. Make sure you wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible after using a shared item. In the event that there is a confirmed or suspected case of COVID-19, we have a dedicated team that would come in and do all the disinfection and cleaning that's required by the Department of Health as well as the CDC. Health checks. This is something that Anelli is going to talk about in more detail. This is just a little bit about it. All staff must take their temperature prior to reporting to work every single day. This is right now, we have to do this. If you are going to come on site, every person that comes on site takes their temperature before reporting to work. We're also doing a digital health assessment. Anelli's going to talk more about that in just a little bit. And then staff will also have their temperature taken upon arrival to work. And there is a note here, while we're fully remote, each individual will be responsible for taking their own temperature upon arrival to the building. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. When our students come back on site, all students will have their temperature taken prior and their health assessed by their parent or guardian. We're working with communications and school health services to make sure that that information is getting out to our families prior to the start of a hybrid model. Parents and guardians will also be asked to fill out a health screening for students every once in a while, and then students will have their temperature taken upon arrival to school. If there is a failed screening, if you feel sick, or you have a temperature over 99.9, you should not report to work. We also don't want you to report to work if you're going to fail a screening. So if you cannot take the digital assessment at home and you have to take it upon arrival to work, we do not want you to come here to fail the screening. We want you to stay home, contact your supervisor and your benefits department. If you start to feel sick at work and it's during a hybrid model and we have a nurse in every building, you would notify the nurse, your supervisor, and the benefits department. There's going to be a little bit more information about that coming up in future slides. If a student fails a screening or temperature check or becomes sick, the nurse would be notified and the nurse would manage that after. And Erin is going to talk more about that in just a little bit. Contact tracing and reporting. Part of what we need to do to make sure that we know who is in the building is that every employee uses their badge to gain access to the building. That way we can easily pull the list of staff members that were in a building. We would use this to provide to the Monroe County Department of Health if we needed to in the event of a contact trace. Employees cannot badge in for other employees. If there's a visitor, they're going to be required to sign into each building. And I'm going to talk more about what reporting is going to look like for the remote learning right at the end of my portion of the presentation. Student attendance must be taken daily, and up-to-date schedules must be maintained. And again, this is for, I know that attendance has to be taken even in remote, but this is for the hybrid, that in case we have to do contact tracing. Staff and students must report to the district if they are positive for COVID-19. We also get reports from Monroe County Department of Health of any positive cases in our district. When we learn of a case, it's through, again, most likely Department of Health. Sometimes the staff member or the student would contact us. We at the district are not permitted to determine who's excluded from school. So who would be put under quarantine or isolation. We work very closely with the Department of Health for community contact tracing efforts and also letting us know what we need to do for our buildings, our students, and our staff. There is more information available with what I think is a very helpful FAQ sheet for Monroe County regarding the return to school and how contact tracing will be handled in all districts, not just ours. If for some reason a visitor does have to come to a building, we really want to limit visitors, but if we have to have a visitor on site, they also have to complete the they will have their temperature taken. If a visitor fails a health screening or fails the temperature screening, they would not be permitted to come inside. Visitors must wear a face cover at all times. Visitors that do not comply would not be allowed to enter the building. Parents and guardians should be met at entry doors whenever possible if they're dropping off or picking up a student or item. And right now we are not issuing permits for building use. So the last thing that I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about is building access during remote learning. For staff that are not required to report to a building on a regular basis, you have to still take the digital assessment either prior to or immediately upon reporting on site. You want to answer all the assessment questions. Again, make sure that you're taking your temperature prior to arrival. You're going to use the main entrance to access the building and report directly to the main office. Once there, you'll take your own temperature using the digital thermometer. We will have automated temperature devices. We do not have them yet. Perform hand hygiene before and after using that thermometer. You do not and should not record your actual temperature. All we want to make sure is that you are under that 99.9 threshold, at or under, I should say. So you're going to sign in, and we need to know your specific locations and the time that you're there. And again, this is for contact tracing purposes as well as disinfection that might need to be done. Classrooms may not be cleaned or disinfected nightly. Please do not leave trash inside of the classrooms. The main reason for this is that during remote learning, our custodial staff are working different hours and they are not always there for a second shift. So getting the entire area cleaned and disinfected in the amount of time that they have available just isn't something that would be possible while we're in remote learning. Again, cleaning and disinfection would look extremely different in a hybrid learning environment. And that is the end of my section. So I'm going to introduce Erin Rotman to talk about the health office.
Good morning. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Mike, and Superintendent Myers-Small. I'm here to discuss the health office management changes that will be required during COVID-19. Most of this information relates to the requirements and management when we're in an in-person model, but we wanted to make sure while we had the opportunity, we covered this information in the event we return. All the information that I'll share follows New York State Education and Department of Health guidance. So health office staffing. So during the virtual learning model, we will have limited nursing staff in our buildings. Each nurse will oversee 3 district buildings during remote learning. Nurses will rotate through these offices. Any information that needs to be shared with nurses can be dropped off or mailed by parents to the main office, emailed to nurses, or faxed to their school health offices. During a hybrid or full in-person schooling, we hope to have 2 health office staff per school to manage COVID concerns and students' health needs. Temperature screening. So as Stacy mentioned, when students are learning in person, parents will be asked to do a screening questionnaire prior to them coming to school, in addition to taking their temperature. When they arrive at school, they will also be taking their temperature. Any student with a temperature greater than 99.9 will be rescreened by the nurse within the next 10 minutes, and based on their rescreen results, they will either be able to return to learning or be sent home. During both remote learning and in-person learning, staff will be asked to complete the screening questionnaire prior to arriving to work. Staff will also be asked to take their temperatures upon arriving and asked to go home if their temperature exceeds 99.9. During the in-person learning, we ask that students and staff limit health office usage to only those students who require medications, need first aid for injuries, or need the nurse to assess symptoms of chronic conditions. In order to limit the number of students in the health office and limit unnecessary exposures, we will be working with parents and medical providers to find out if students can take medication at home. So students who are taking morning meds, we are going to prefer that they take them at home prior to coming to school. Any triage will take place outside of the classroom when there are 2 available health office staff in that office. Nurses will provide teachers with supply kits and instructions of what to do for minor issues and when to call the nurse's office. These supply kits will have Band-Aids, gauze, gloves, tooth fairy envelopes, and sanitary pads so that the minor issues can be handled within the classroom. Any staff or student entering the health office must wear a mask. Nurses will put a sign on the door indicating when the office is at capacity. Students will be asked to wait outside the nurse's office, socially distanced, until there is space in the nurse's office for the nurse to see them. During in-person learning, every building will be required to have an isolation room where students who have signs and symptoms of COVID will wait to be picked up by a parent or transported home. It is imperative that we have a working number for our parents and guardians. So any new contact information you receive, please have PowerSchool updated with that information. Any staff monitoring the isolation room will be required to have a mask, gown, and gloves. We will arrange transportation in the event that a parent cannot transport the student home. So if a student presents with symptoms of COVID while in school, all of our nurses have a flow chart they will follow that indicates the COVID symptoms and what to do if a child is symptomatic and when they may return to school. The teacher will be asked to call the nurse when they identify any student with a COVID symptom. These symptoms could include onset of cough, fever, shortness of breath, sore throat, nausea, or vomiting. We also ask that they additionally call us anytime they recognize flushing of the cheeks, rapid difficulty breathing, fatigue, irritability, or frequent use of the bathroom. The nurse will assess the student outside of the classroom if we have 2 health office staff in the building. The nurse will identify if the symptoms are the result of an underlying chronic condition or known issue that is commonly exhibited by the student. If the symptoms are unexplained, the student will be monitored in the isolation room until the parent can transport them home, or we will give them transportation home. Any student who is sent home will be asked to be tested. So a return to school. So students who have received testing can return to school when the test result is negative and we receive a note from an MD that indicates the illness is unrelated to COVID. If the student tests positive, they can return once they are cleared by the Department of Health. The Department of Health would put that student in quarantine for a certain number of days, and we would get a release note for that student. If the student has no test, they would be home until the MD clears the student by attesting the symptoms are not due to a COVID-related condition. It would be related to a chronic condition. Or the student is fever-free for 24 hours, off medication, and it has been 10 days since the onset of symptoms or other symptoms have improved. We will work closely with the Department of Health on returning any student who is sent home with symptoms who is not tested. We will ask for their clearance for these students. So just to touch base on immunizations, it is very important that students are vaccinated to prevent any vaccine preventable outbreak. We don't want a vaccine preventable outbreak during a pandemic. We want to make sure all our students are up to date on their immunizations. The State Department of Health has informed all districts that students learning both in person and remotely must still be compliant by the 14th calendar day of school. Our nurses will have a busy 2 weeks going through our records to decide which students need vaccines and give them the resources they need to obtain those vaccines. We are planning on holding flu clinics at Central Office and the Service Center this fall for staff. It is extremely important that anyone able to obtain a flu shot does so this year. And we will be encouraging all students to obtain their flu shot through mailing, signage, robocalls, and outreach to family, whether in person or hybrid learning. Screening. So vision, hearing, and scoliosis screenings has been waived for the 2020-21 school year. Nurses will only do those students who have been identified with concerns, and that's in an in-person model. Teachers would alert the nurse of any students who they have concerns about. For pre-K and K screenings, those are still mandated by the state. We will be picking 2 or 3 schools that are easily accessible to parents, and we will screen students by appointment only. So employee illness, I know Stacy went over this, and we will hear from Anneli also. If an employee becomes ill at work and they are asked to go home, if it is a situation where students are learning in person and there's a nurse in the building, we ask that they call the nurse and the supervisor and alert them to their symptoms and that they're going home. If there is no one in the building, we ask that they immediately go home and call their supervisor in the benefits office when they get home. And Anneli will be addressing the procedures if you are out of work due to illness in more detail. So that concludes my presentation, and we will move forward with Anneli Rivera-Nothnagel.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad you're here, and I have to move up my video. I apologize about that. We are going to be doing a benefit overview, and I cannot seem to get this to move. Okay. The agenda, we're going to review COVID assessment tool. I think most of you probably have already taken the assessment today. If you haven't, you really should have been. And hopefully after this presentation, you'll be able to know how to do that and know where to contact in case you have any questions regarding the assessment tool. We're going to review the Family First Corona Response Act. This went into effect April 1st. It has 2 components, of which Employee paid sick leave is one of them, and emergency paid family leave is one other component of it. We're going to review some of our wellness programs that we're going to be implementing or have implemented in order to address some of the anxiety and stress that's going on right now, and that you probably are feeling because of all the changes and all the differences that are going on with everybody's day-to-day today. So we're going to be reviewing that in a short period of time. The next slide. And then just again, overview of the assessment. New York State Department of Health requires that all employees be screened for COVID-19 symptoms, and they have to do it every single day. So it's not something that we are trying to do to you. It is something that's required by New York State. Part of this, as Stacy and both Aaron have talked about, includes a daily temperature check. And so we are asking, as everybody told you beforehand, to do those temperature checks at home. If you can't do the temperature checks at home, let me know so I understand why it is that you can't do it. But we are requiring that those be done prior to coming into the work site. And we also have on work site a repeat of the temperature checks as Stacy had reviewed with you. The assessment logistics, emails are sent to all employees at around 3 o'clock. They start sending out at 3 o'clock. We have over 6,000 emails that go out. So obviously we can't hit everybody at 3 o'clock, but you'll see from 3 to about 3:30, those emails are going out to all employees so that they go out before employees start work. You can assess your emails using the district laptops, your personal smartphones. You can do web-based emails from any computer on site, or you can go to www.office.com using their district email address and their passwords to sign in. You can have your, if you don't want your emails, like someone told me they didn't want their district emails going onto their personal phones, that's fine. Create a rule on Outlook that sends your questionnaire, the assessment, over to your personal email. You don't even have to log in, it just gets sent to your email. If you need instructions on how to do that, we'll post that so that people know how to do a rule to assess that. COVID assessment logistics, if employees do not have access to the district emails, there'll be a kiosk eventually at the work location. If not, there's going to be paper assessments. So anyone that can't do it from home or remotely will be able to do the paper assessment at their locations. You should not begin work until you've completed your assessment. Do not come into work if you already feel like you're going to fail the assessment. So if you have, and I'll go over what the 4 questions are so that you'll know exactly what it is. The COVID assessment starts like this. Please remember to log in and complete your daily health screening questionnaire. When those emails come, those emails are directly created for that person. So don't share your link because someone else can't get into their email account. Don't share it with someone else, because you're then going to have that other person answer that COVID assessment question for you. So it is person specific. Upon opening the assessment, an employee is asked if they'll be reporting to work on site. If they say no, then you're done. It says thank you. If you say yes, then they'll continue on to the assessment. If they say no, if you say no, but later on decide, oh no, I'm gonna come in, something's happened, I have to come in, that's fine. Complete a paper assessment when you get to your work site. Do the temperature check when you get there. This is what it looks like. There is a mandatory health screening assessment. Are you working on site today? Yes or no. That's how it starts the assessment. A lot of you have already done this, so you know how it looks like, but I wanted to at least do a screenshot so people were familiar with it. COVID assessment question number 1, have you had any COVID-19 symptoms that you cannot attribute to another condition? And we're very clear on asking that question because my allergy medicine, I'm gonna have a runny nose, I'm gonna have a sore throat. It's that time of year. So if you know already that it's caused by something else, then answer it as if you know that that's not the reason why. The only thing we're trying to get to is the COVID. With the COVID, there was a question, I'm sorry. Is it focused on, on COVID? So if you answer the question and go, I don't know why I have a fever, well, I don't know why I have any of those other issues, then you would say, yes, I have those symptoms, and then you would, be reviewed by us. So question 1 is that a list of symptoms. We didn't put the full symptoms, but they can be found on that link under government, CDC, government coronavirus. So that link will give you the whole full list of what the assessment questions are, or symptoms are. Have you had a positive COVID-19 test in the last 14 days? That goes without saying. If you tested positive, you should not be in the office. And then question number 3 is, have you knowingly had close contact with a person who had tested positive or suspected to have COVID-19 in the past 14 days? And knowingly is really the key here. You have to be within 6 feet of an infected person for at least 15 minutes. So if you went to Wegmans and suddenly there's a report in the news that said you went to the Pittsford Wegmans and there was a person with COVID in it, you probably didn't have no issues because you were not within 6 feet of the person, not probably 15 minutes with them. So there really isn't an issue with that. So knowingly had contact, you went to a birthday party and you were sitting next to your aunt who had it, something like that, that's when we would really want you to say yes to that question. Okay, question number 3. We've had a lot of people do travel. We've had people who traveled to a state, didn't know that they were on the travel advisory, or may not have been on the travel advisory when they left New York State. And suddenly when they come back, it's on there. If you've gone to a New York State travel advisory location, you have to quarantine 14 days from the date you come into New York State. It's not from the date you left that state, it's from the date you enter New York State again. And no, you can't test out of it. So New York State guidelines say once you've gone to one of those travel advisory states, then what ends up happening is that you have to quarantine for the full 14 days. Going to your doctor, getting a COVID test, whether it's negative or not, won't get you out of the 14-day assessment, 14-day quarantine. It's a requirement of New York State. The travel advisory list changes all the time. So we have the link Corona Health, New York State Travel Advisory, or you can just look New York State Travel Advisory on Google and it'll come up. It'll tell you all the states that are currently on there. So definitely before you move anywhere or go anywhere or travel anywhere, make sure that you are looking at that travel advisory list. Anytime that you say yes to the assessment tool, it'll generate an automatic notification to you saying do not report to work. But also it will generate an automatic assessment to the benefits department and to your supervisor. Now, benefits, we ask that you contact us directly to tell us, what's going on. In some cases it was, I mistakenly said yes, I didn't mean to, hit that number. I didn't mean to say yes, I meant to say no. And then we'll, just make a note of it and move on and have you go into work. For those that, say yes and there's an issue, we will review it. Definitely try and contact us. If we don't hear from you, we will contact you back. And if we can't find you, we will contact your supervisor. We cannot have you in the building if you said yes. So we will definitely be checking to make sure that you're not in the building or working in the day. Now, if your supervisor can have you work remotely when you're home, then that's fine. They have the approval or the authority to do that, to send you home and work from home so that you don't lose any time. But really what we need to do is make sure that we're following that process, that you're contacting us or that we're in touch with you within that day to understand what's going on. If there's a positive yes, like a person does actually have a yes and they've tested positive to COVID, once you're out because of yes for any of those questions, we require, and there's no reason like an allergy or, I had food poisoning, or I've heard a lot of different reasons why they may have said yes to one of the questions. But if it's not anything that we can attribute to something else and we are sending you out of work, then you will need a doctor's note to return back. So someone who says yes will need to go to their doctor and the doctor would need to clear them before we return them back. Does that mean that I have to have a COVID test? We're not mandating COVID tests. What we're saying is you need to go to the doctor. Most times your doctor will recommend a COVID test, or they will keep you out the full 10 to 14 day quarantine. Again, we're not doctors. I'm not going to make that medical decision, but your doctor will. Okay. So when you get the report, it will look like this. And a visitor failed to, meet COVID-19 requirements. It'll say the name of the person, their email address. So we get a report that looks like this from the automation. Supervisors should be getting emails every day, and they should be checking their emails. Employees should not return back to work site. An employee has the ability to work from home again. Like I said, you can do so. So what does that mean? We send you home. Does that mean that it gets taken out of your sync bag? Not necessarily. Because of the pandemic, they created 2 different leaves, and it's under the FFCRA. So when you talk to benefits, we'll often talk about FFCRA, and what we mean is Family First Corona Response Act. It's a big mouthful, so we use FFCRA. It went into effect April 1st in response to the COVID pandemic, and it consists of 2 paid leave provisions: emergency paid sick leave, which requires us to pay you 2 weeks of paid sick time, either 2/3 pay or 100% pay for 2 weeks. And the specific reasons we'll go over shortly. Emergency family medical leave, it's up to 10 weeks of 2/3 pay to care for a child under certain circumstances, and we'll again go into it. This provision expires December 31st, so we don't know if it's going to be extended. I'm sure they'll review it once if the pandemic continues, which I hope it does not. But at this point, I don't know if it's going to expire. Differences between FFCRA and FMLA. FFCRA is attached to FMLA. It has a lot of the same similarities, but there are some differences. Under FFCRA, employee must work for the district at least 30 days prior to their request for leave. Under FMLA, they have to have worked at least a year. Under FFCRA, all employees are eligible, and under FMLA, you have to have at least 1,250 hours in the past year. How rate is determined is based on average earnings over a 6-month rollback period. So, and under FMLA, it's not paid, so we don't worry about the earnings. Under FFCRA, you can only take it once, at least, up to a max of the 10 days. And then after that, you no longer have that ability to use that. FMLA renews every, on a rollback calendar year or a rollback year. So after 12 months, we roll back and look at in a chunk of 12 months rollback. Intermittent leave is permitted on an employer's discretion, and actually that has changed just within the last few days. It is now required that we issue intermittent leave. It was discretionary. It was changed about a few days ago. So with this pandemic, things are changing like every day. So what we tell you 1 minute may be changing the next day. Intermittent leave under FMLA is allowed for most employees, not always for front-facing staff. So under FMLA, people that are directly in front of students, are not given intermittent leave, and that's because of component of FMLA regs. Open to FFCRA is open to anyone in the household. FMLA is for immediate family members. So if you have fiance that you're living with, if you have an aunt that you're living with, anyone that's living in your immediate household, if they get sick and you have to quarantine because of them, you are eligible for the FFCRA. It does not does not hit anybody outside of the household. So if you say, well, I've got my grandmother or my mother, but they're not living with you and within your house and have pandemic, have the COVID, then that doesn't apply. If they're not quarantined, it doesn't apply, but we can go into each situation. If you have questions, you can always contact the benefits department. Next, paid sick leave, qualifying events. So if you're unable to telework or unable to work, you're subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID. So someone, Department of Health or your doctor is quarantining you. You've been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine related to COVID, or you're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and you're seeking medical diagnosis. You don't know if you have it, but you've got coughing, you've got a fever, you can't taste anything, and your doctor's sending you for testing. You would qualify for the emergency paid sick leave. That would be those % pay. Anything below that is 2/3 pay. So if you're caring for an individual subject to an order described in number 1, so your child was in college and then got sent home because they had got COVID and you have to take care of them, then you're 2/3 pay. you're caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed because of COVID, then it's 2/3 pay. The sixth one, no one can figure out what that is. It was kind of thrown in there, and I've talked to or seen a lot of seminars and webinars, and no attorney can figure out why they put that one in there. So usually we hit on the 5. Emergency paid leave, FMLA. An employee qualifies for emergency family leave, and the employee is caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed for reasons related to COVID. This applies to also hybrid models. If it's partially closed, like a hybrid model, will still qualify. When it does not qualify is when your school is open and you choose not to send your child to school. So we will ask during the qualification, if you're applying, why the person is out, of school, we will check to make sure that the school has been closed or that they're partially in a hybrid mode. But if the school is completely open, you do not qualify. If you, select personally to not send a child to school, that is your option, but it does not fall under the emergency paid FMLA. How to apply. You need to contact the benefits department for the emergency paid sick leave. Medical documentation will be needed to be submitted to support requests for leave. For emergency FMLA, the employee needs to complete an application and submit proof of the school or care center being closed, and benefits reviews and notifies employees and supervisors of the approval. And that concludes that. So I talked earlier, and actually Dr. Myers-Small talked about wellness and keeping kids and employees well. And so I wanted to add this as a component as well to talk about what we're doing at the RCSD to keep our employees healthy. Some of you probably have attended or have read about the fact that we are having virtual wellness classes. We started this, I think, in about April. They have been very well attended. We have about 30 to 50 people attending each class, which I think is pretty good for a virtual program. We decided, based on the feedback from employees and based on the positives that we're hearing about the programs, that we're going to continue doing this through the time frame that we are working remotely. So we will run from September 8th through November 16th doing the virtual programs. We have a program every day. I did talk with people who were attending the program, so we talked to staff as well as teachers and numbers of people that have taken the class, got their feedback as to when might be good times to provide the classes. So this is the program we've come up with at this time. And that is posted on our website. So wellness grants, we will be launching wellness grants for this year as well. And as a lot of the locations know, the grants are for $500. Grants are site specific, and it's for programs that are for all employees. Grants are usually submitted by the building wellness leader or by the building administrator. If you have ideas for those, let your building administrator or your wellness coordinator know. These will be virtual programs, but we are going to be launching them. We already have a few people who have contacted me that were interested in doing a virtual wellness program for their location. So we're going to be doing it again. The next one, EAP. We continue to have EAP available for all employees. It is a free service. I know it's got counseling services. It does provider supports. Anybody who's looking for child care centers that might be open, they can help you and assist you in this. All of these programs that they offer are free for employees, and we really talk about getting people to use this. We're also relaunching, or we're working on relaunching an RCSD support group that was done earlier in about March. I believe we rolled one out for about 2 days. We are looking to continue that, and we will be notifying employees when that gets completed, or we're going to be launching that. But that is something that we're working on doing as well for employees. And the next, telemedicine. Behavioral health services are available through telemedicine. Visits are virtual, either by phone or online. And then an employee can follow one provider for the entire length of their treatment. So usually you think of telemedicine, you think of one shot, I've got a sinus infection, we'll talk to this person on telemedicine and then we're done. But telemedicine for behavioral health issues can be treated with the same provider. So you can actually have that provider be your behavioral health specialist throughout the length of your treatment, who because of, the situations that are going on, anxiety, stress that's going on, you can reach out to use your Excelis Blue Cross Blue Shield coverage that we have, use telemedicine, and it's $5 a visit, so it's very affordable, and it is something that can be done virtually. Okay, and you can flip on the next one. Questions. So at this point, we can kind of open it up for questions.
The first question is, when we eventually return to building teaching, will disinfectant wipes and hand sanitizers be provided to teaching staff, or will we have to purchase it out of our classroom budget allocation?
I can take that one, Tavares. So we will have disinfectant wipes, or actually spray bottles of disinfectant, and also hand sanitizer for every single classroom once the in-person learning model goes into place.
Okay.
People not use their own because we do have people with allergies in the buildings. So, and some of them are pretty severe. So the district provides disinfectant and wipes that keep that in mind.
Thank you. Will you make face masks and coverings required no matter what, independent of space? It should be mandatory at all times.
Stacey, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get my camera back on. I apologize. So it is mandatory in the sense that people will be wearing their face covers pretty much all of the time. There are some instances, and we are required by Department of Health guidelines to give mask breaks, even when people are wearing them most of the time. So we have to allow people to eat, we have to allow people to drink, and we also have to define specific mask break times. And we will be developing a much more specific plan prior to the return, again, based on the information that's available from the Department of Health at that time. Like Anelli said, things change pretty rapidly with the guidelines that are provided to us. So we want to make sure that we have the appropriate plan in place prior to the start of the school year. During this remote time, when we have only adults and staff in place, we work a little bit more like an office setting, where when people are in their own space, they're in their 6 feet of defined space, they are allowed to remove their face cover. And that, again, is going along with the Department of Health guidelines that we were provided.
Thank you, Stacey. One person asked, and they weren't quite sure, did they hear that kids do not have to wear masks?
There may potentially be a few very limited situations where a child would not have to wear a mask. This is a medical requirement. Again, it's by Department of Health and SED. We cannot exclude a child because of a medical inability to wear a mask. The Monroe County Department of Health came up with guidance documents for physicians, for pediatricians, that they have to follow to get that medical clearance to us. So it would be very specific situations that were provided by the physician. And then we would have to work to create a plan for that specific child.
Okay, the next question would be, does this mean that a teacher cannot go closer than 6 feet to help them learn?
No, we want to encourage 6 feet of space at all times, even with a face cover on. That social distance really is important, but that does not mean that the 6 feet of space can never be broached or breached, I should say. There are instances when it's going to happen. There are children that require assistance where people will have to continually be within 6 feet of space, and they would be provided with different personal protective equipment. People who are doing it on a more limited basis, or in some instances where we are also providing barriers depending on what that activity is, so that if a child and a staff member continually have to be within 6 feet of space. So that's a long way of saying, no, they don't always have to be 6 feet apart, but our preferred, or not even our, I can't say our, the Department of Health guidelines is preferred 6 feet at all times unless the activity warrants getting closer.
This question states, where can we find the report indicating the upgrade filters in the HVAC system in all the buildings so we know it is safer to work from our classrooms and offices?
So all the building filtration will be upgraded to what we refer to as a MERV 13. That's the grade that is used predominantly in doctors' offices and hospital level. So all those filters, will be installed and fully ready to go by the return to in-person instruction.
Question is, what if a child is sick and can't send the student home, either no permission from parent or no transportation to get student home or no one home to receive student, then what happens to the student?
Oh, I'll answer that one. That's really what that isolation space is for. That space is for students to be confined and not expose others while they're ill in school. So we would wait until the end of the day if we need to. They would stay in that space until the end of the day. There'll be a cot, chairs in there. Someone will be monitoring them. And then hopefully by the end of the day, we can arrange busing for them to return home. They would not get on the bus with other students. It would be a bus that would just be them.
Okay. This question is, how and when will students get these detailed guidelines? What's in place to ensure student compliance to the procedure?
Stacey, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, we've been working with communications to create information for families. This includes our website. I know that they are working on a bulletin or a letter of some kind to go out as well, and robocalls. So we're using all of that as well as social media as we get closer to make sure that parents know what the expectations are prior to a hybrid return.
What kind of barrier will be provided when working with students who may not be able to wear a face mask?
So if there's a student who's unable to wear a face mask, that 6 feet of social distance from other students would be very important. We're also looking at different types of barriers that I don't want to say would go around the student because that makes them sound like they're isolated and in some kind of fishbowl situation, and we don't want it to look at it like that at all. But there would be barriers that we can use that are movable and easily used by teachers that we can put up around a student so that they are kind of in their own area, they're clear, so they're not isolated in that way where they wouldn't be able to interact. And then if there is the need for a staff member to get closer than 6 feet, that staff member at a minimum would have their face cover and a face shield, similar to how they're allowing other activities take place with people's face cover off now with the Department of Health. So the requirement for that is a face cover and a face shield.
What is the difference between daily clean and a deep clean of the building?
I don't know, Mike, do you?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So what we will be doing, once again, when we get into the hybrid model, as the superintendent alluded to, in mid to late November, what we would like to do is use that Wednesday to kind of go over everything again to make sure that we have every space accounted for. So on our nightly cleaning, we'll do all the common areas and classrooms and offices, et cetera. And then the full day cleaning provides us just some extra time to go and go back over those spaces before we have a new group of children arriving at school. So just a little bit of a buffer in order for us to accommodate. These are very, very large facilities, and as everybody knows, our custodial staff is stretched right to the max. So this was some much needed time in order to take care of all those additional spaces.
Okay.
So there's quite a few questions in regards to classroom setups and the sneeze guards and so forth. I think for our actually hybrid start time, our start date in mid-November, all the classrooms will be set up with the 6 foot social distancing between desks. And where appropriate in offices and in that area, we will have the plexiglass sneeze guards available where they're required to have. In addition, we have several buildings that have tables that students work at. So those classrooms will be set up and there will be a sneeze guard between those students as they sit at those tables. What we really ask is once the classrooms are set up, and right now the majority are, that teachers not move the desks or reorganize those classrooms. It just makes a lot less of a burden of effort for our custodial staff in order to get those classrooms set up and ready to go for the first day of instruction. And then the other item was around temperature checks. There's quite a bit of questions going back and forth in regards to that. So we are the hand check temperature device, where all you would need to do is put your wrist under a device and it'll automatically check your temperature, which will eliminate the using of the hand thermometers in most situations. We'll have we chose not to install them using a lot of overtime just because of our district's financial situation. They will all be in place here within the next couple of weeks, so we will have one available in each building for the limited number of staff to utilize when they're coming in. There will still be the handheld thermometers available. And then by the time we actually go into a hybrid operation in November, we will have enough temperature scanning devices to do all the students as they come in the building as well. So a little bit of modification in that, but we thought it was prudent not to expend resources in this time period when we only will have a very, very limited number of people in these buildings for the first several weeks of school.
So I think you kind of answered this one, Mike, where a person asked, are they able to teach from the building if they choose to? It seems to be a different set of rules for each building.
Yes, there's what I talked to as the school chiefs this morning, and we will resend out the clear guidelines over the expectations for teachers when they are for working from the building over the next several weeks, so that we have one set of guidance that's in writing. So instead of me trying to answer that question now, that will come out here within the next hour or so. So we have one document for everybody to refer to. And once again, it's not just teachers, although the abundance of people on this call are teachers. It's also all of our support staff, and making sure all that aligns with our guidelines. So there is not a different set of rules for each building, and that will be firmly clarified here in the next hour or so.
This question is, we have the daily screening, but what about asymptomatic carriers? Shouldn't testing actually be tested or be required before teachers and admins return to the building?
We can't mandate a COVID assessment, a COVID test. It's against ADA regulations. So we can't mandate that employees get COVID tested. Now, if employees want to, they can. We just can't do it. So the best thing we can do is do an assessment and make sure that, ask the right questions about, are you near people that have the symptoms? Have you been to areas that you shouldn't have been? That's the best we can do. We can't mandate a person get tested.
The other thing that's important to add about that is that we are following the recommendations of Dr. Mendoza and the Monroe County Department of Health. And he recently did a town hall speaking directly about testing and how really that is only a snapshot, right? Like the testing only tells you exactly how you're doing at that moment. So 2 days later, there's a potential for you to be positive. So that's why it's really important that we use all of the health hygiene, the social distancing, and our mask wear in the right way to make sure that we're protecting everyone from a potential asymptomatic carrier. So it's not just whether or not we can require the testing, it's also not recommended at this point for every person to get a test. And there's no schedule for it either. So that's another thing to note about that.
There's a 38% chance of doing a false negative if a person doesn't even have symptoms. So the chances of us actually having someone test and actually test positive, if they're not symptomatic, if they have no symptoms, is really low. So, or we might get a false negative on it anyway. But if you're wearing your face mask, if you're keeping 6 feet away, the risk of you actually contracting anything from a person who has COVID is very low. So I'm finding that some of the issues that we're having is if a person tests positive, and don't carry any of the symptoms and they've been around people, the biggest issue we find is that everybody around them has not worn their face mask, has been close to them, less than 6 feet from them, have been sharing items without disinfecting. If you're following those steps, the risk of actually getting COVID from someone that has it is low. So as long as you're adhering to those guidelines, even if someone does have asymptomatics, I'm not saying it's zero, I'm not saying that there's no risk at all, but the chances of contracting it, if you're following the rest of the steps, is low.
There's a couple of questions there that came up that I may be able to package together. So one was, as the classrooms are set up, our guidance right now is 12 students per room. So the principals will be working with their school chief to get us as we get closer to the hybrid model opening, will get us a number. So those classrooms will already be set up with the necessary 12 desks or tables or whatnot that the students will be utilizing. The other question was in regards to other teacher desks and teacher tables and so forth. If they're not able to fit and with the desks that are the student desks and student work areas, then they'll be put into storage, most likely in the building, to be utilized when we return back to a more traditional instructional model. And then the third area was if a room is undersized, and we do certainly have rooms that are a little bit smaller across the district. The number of students in the room is based on the size of the room. So the 12 is not the number, it's based on the size of the room. The rooms that I've verified over the past several weeks have all been able to accommodate the number of 12, which falls in line with most of our class sizes. And once again, remember, we're only talking about pre-K to 4. So I think that's the guidelines we have. I think what I would say is if a teacher has a specific question about their room or their setup or whatnot, for them to go first to their principal. And then if we can't get the answer at the building level, then certainly the principal can reach out to the chief and or myself, and we can do a follow-up and a site visit as well. So this situation is incredibly fluid. And, the questions we actually answer even this morning could very much change by the time we get to, a different status point in October or early November. So we really appreciate your patience. We know all of you have been dealing with this all summer and as we have, and as you said, just like the guidelines for everything from opening gyms and so forth have changed, this will certainly change itself, and we will continue to modify and update you as those changes become accordingly. What we really ask is, one, for patience, and certainly the operations team will be very responsive, so that we don't want anybody to come into a situation where they're not comfortable with the classroom setup or whatnot. So we want to be completely transparent in regards to all those different issues as they arise. And that my team has been very, as many of you know, working with them, my team has been very upfront in terms of working with that. So, and we appreciate your patience as we get started.
It's a parent question.
You get any additional questions for us?
Yes, a couple more. Who will follow up with parents who do not complete the health survey, and will students be admitted into the school? And the second part is there free testing for students and families? And where would that be located?
Erin or Stacey, you want to take that one?
I think it's an Erin question.
Erin.
I can answer the question about the free testing. Monroe Community College has a free testing site that's run by the New York State Department of Health. It's by appointment only, and the number to make the appointment is at the New York State Department of Health website. As far as the assessment question, families will be communicated through communications when we return to a hybrid model, that they will need to ask these certain questions in the morning to their children and take their temperature. There is no need for them to record that information for us, and that's per New York State Department of Education guidelines. That is why once they get to school, we will be taking their temperature again.
And there was a question I saw about students taking their own temperature, and I apologize if I was confusing when I spoke about that. The children would never be taking their own temperatures. That's just for the remote learning right now, where staff, until those automatic temperature readers that Mike spoke about are installed and in place, staff would be required to take their own temperatures, again, using hand hygiene in between. And once those are installed, they would use those automated systems, and then we would have enough in place for the kids to use those automated temperature screen systems as well. So kids will never be taking their own temperature upon arrival to school. And I apologize if I was confusing about that.
This question is, while we are remote, you travel outside the state, and since we are remote, are we able to work while quarantining?
That would be up to your supervisor to decide, because there are some positions that do require the person to be on site or to come on site at times. But if you can do your work remotely and your supervisor has approved it, that's fine. As long as you're quarantining it, remotely, that's not a problem. They can still work if their role allows them to.
So there are several questions around PPE and availability for staff. So I can certainly take that one if you'd like me to.
Sure, thank you.
So there's several items in the different chat boxes here around PPE for staff members. So we work very specifically with representatives from the Rochester Teachers Association. They've sat on our COVID operations committee and provided a great level of feedback. So all the PPE that's been asked for or required has been purchased, and we have delivered, for lack of a better way of saying it, to the buildings. We had a little bit of a delay on Friday afternoon, but by noon today, every building should have masks for every staff member, as well as hand sanitizing solution and so forth, and that was delivered to those main offices. Once again, with a very limited number of people in the buildings, those masks will be set aside until we have a much more larger number that come to those to the schools. But it has been delivered, and then we have some other items such as face shields, for example, that we know people who are working more in closer proximity with students are going to ask for that, are going to need that extra level of protection. So we have those items as well. We did not deliver those yet to the buildings because we won't have that instruction in that level of proximity. But that is here, it's been ordered, it's been delivered, and will be ready to be deployed as we move closer to our actual hybrid start.
There's a question about communications. Is asking, has communications thought about the families who do not speak English? Many of the E&L families do not read even in their own language, and also not all E&L are Spanish.
Can't speak entirely for communications, but I can speak to the meetings that I've been in. I know that there is thought being given to that, and I know that they are working on multiple different ways to make sure that families are communicated with in a way that they will understand what is being asked. I can't speak more specifically than that.
Yeah, other than if there's certainly a need out there to require additional translated documents and so forth, then we'll certainly provide that.
So a teacher pushing in, do the articles that they use need to be cleaned between classes and dried as well? And can they be dried off manually? What's the step-by-step protocol for cleaning items used by push-in teachers?
So some of that is really going to depend on what that item is, what they're doing, where they're pushing into. Are we still going to push in the same way? And those are details that are really almost on a case-by-case basis. But I could use one as an example. I'm someone that's going to push in, and I have some manipulatives that I use when I work with a student. I'm going to have space to be able to do that. It may be that if we go back pre-K through 4 hybrid, that a different space is actually identified where you wouldn't push in, but you'd actually maybe pull that student out. Again, all within the policies and procedures of how that's supposed to be done with their IEP and things like that. But let's say I am going to push in, I'm working with a student, they use blocks or something as an example. There's 2 options. One, the blocks have to be disinfected in between each use. They would have to have the contact time for the disinfectant in use. Our current disinfectant has a 10-minute contact time, so that means it would have to stay wet for 10 minutes before it was used again. After 10 minutes, you absolutely can manually dry it off, but it has to stay wet for 10 minutes. The other option is to have more than one set available so that the student would use it, you disinfect it, and then go to the next student, use it with that student, and swap it in between. There are also recommendations for how long things can sit, and I'll say quarantine, but how long they have to sit before they're used again. And that depends on the material it's made of. And there are more specifics about that that are in our safety plan and would be provided prior to the start of a hybrid model as well.
How will bathrooms be maintained and cleaned once students return back to school?
So the plan right now, and once again, our hybrid will be a pre-K4 environment, is that we're going to deploy additional custodial resources to those buildings during those school days. So there'll be additional personnel on site in order to make sure those bathrooms are cleaned and are properly cleaned throughout the day.
How much time will be given before reopening to get classrooms ready?
I can certainly take that one. I think the superintendent had mentioned earlier around coming back together with our school community throughout the month of October to gain more feedback, take a look at the current data at that particular point and make a decision. But certainly well in enough time to make sure the classrooms are appropriately set up and our transportation is accounted for. So I would not put a particular date on it as of now, but certainly logic would dictate that there'll be plenty of time for people to adjust their schedules and be ready for an opening day that we all really hope comes soon.
Will the district provide additional support to staff to assist with manning the isolation room outside the nurse's office if it is full and taking temperature as students enter the building?
Yeah, so we're hoping when we go have at least 2 health office staff in each building at a time. So one can man the nurse's office and one can man the isolation space if required.
This person is asking, if the goal is to be back in person teaching by November 16th, how does that work with people then possibly traveling out of town for Thanksgiving break?
And Melanie, do you want to take that one?
I don't know what the answer will be. I don't know how that model will work with break, and it's to be determined, I guess. It's too soon to have a definitive answer for that.
What response can a teacher expect if she contacts admin to report a student who refuses to keep their mask on? Please explain in hybrid learning.
Yeah, there were certainly a couple of questions in regards to the requirement of student masks and the accountability aligned with that. So I think for us, first and foremost, I think its priority is that it's an education opportunity, right? So we know everyone in our community has to wear a mask, in an abundance of situations. So, first part of this is going to be obviously educating our children to make sure that they understand not only that they have to wear a mask, but also why that is. And then as Stacey pointed out earlier, the appropriate times when a child can have a mask break and so forth. In terms of the accountability for a student that refuses to wear a mask, I'm going to really defer to the principals and the school chiefs, because they'll provide very clear, documentation around what the accountability will be. What it cannot be is a difference between one school to the next. That has to be a consistent set of guidelines, and if accountability is in some cases required, then it must be consistent across all buildings. But once again, I think our colleagues who are embarking on this right now will also have some feedback for us as we look to make this transition later in the fall, because we're all going to be dealing with some similar challenges going forward. But the number one priority here is safety, and it's education for all of us. So even when adults were asked to wear a mask in public, even that took a while to have a level of education involved with it. And we've actually seen across the country that there are still areas where people refuse to wear masks, and that's created a series of confrontations that have been very well documented. So our hope is to make sure that we use it as much more as a positive, build that capacity within, use it as an instructional piece, and then if we have some situations where we have to address a student, then our chiefs and our principals will take the lead on that.
Last question before you wrap up, Mike. Will the school be closed if a student or staff has COVID and exposed the students and other staff?
I lost that part. Can you say that one more time, please, Sarah?
Will the school be closed if a student or staff has COVID and exposed the students and other staff?
Erin, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So if a student is positive for COVID and we find out from the Department of Health, the guidance we are currently receiving from our county local Department of Health is that classroom will be shut down for 24 hours while they do contact tracing. That contact tracing will identify any student or staff member who is in close contact with that student. And that is defined as being less than 6 feet apart without a mask for longer than 15 minutes. So in that situation, the Department of Health would reach out to those students or staff members, and they would be placed on isolation. It doesn't necessarily mean that that classroom will remain closed or that the school will need to close. It was really situational dependent, and we would, go with the guidance from the Department of Health at that point.
Okay, that's the questions for right now, Mike.
Okay, I think once again, I really want to thank Stacy, Aaron, and Anneli for their time this morning. These are certainly not easy responsibilities when we deal with these difficult topics and making sure everything is cohesive. And I think the 3 points of this as we go forward. One is certainly your patience as we move through this, because obviously things are going to change and it's very fluid day to day and week to week as we get closer to a possible November hybrid opening. I think the second is, let's really focus on having the data and the facts drive our decision making. I think quite often if we let emotion be the key indicator on this, then it sometimes will affect our own individual judgments as educators. So let's really focus on that. And I think the third piece, if you're not comfortable, then you certainly please start with your support levels that you're building to get some questions answered. And then if you're not yet comfortable with that yet, then we certainly, the school chiefs can become involved and they can provide information to us as we look forward to provide the support for you. So we really welcome everybody back. It's incredibly difficult circumstances, but we have a great team here and a great set of teachers and administrators that I know we can work together, and with that we can make this an incredible positive experience for our kids. And with that, I'm going to conclude and turn it over to Dr. Myers-Small.
So I wanted to just thank all of the team. Operations certainly often is an area that gets, sometimes we just don't think about operations, right? We take it for granted, but I know Mike and his team have been working incredibly hard. Aaron, I know, and Stacy, in your realm with the medical and those safety aspects, not easy. And as Mike said, there certainly is a lot of emotion attached to it. And it has not been easy, but I want to thank everyone for their professionalism, their expertise. And what we found is that this situation is constantly evolving. We get information from the health department, or it comes from the governor's office, or it comes from the state education department. And we've had to pivot very quickly. So I just want to thank everyone for their flexibility. But as Mike said, this does involve all of us just being patient with one another. This is the first time we're going through some of these things. And so we will work hard to get the answers to your questions. The bottom line is we do want everyone, staff, students, our families, to be safe. So we'll continue to evaluate. We'll work to keep you updated on where we are with different aspects of our plan. And, the goal is to make a decision 2 to 3 weeks before the 10 weeks is up, so individuals can have ample time, planning time, should we shift and or if we're going to stay in hybrid. But I'm just grateful for everyone working together and partnering together on behalf, bottom line, it's on behalf of our students. And again, I just continue to remain super excited about Monday and the start for our scholars.
Thank you, everyone who has presented today. We really appreciate such great presentations. Again, any other questions that were not answered, we will be capturing those questions in a document and published to the district. At this time, you've been given a small gift of time. We will ask that everyone take a break and return back promptly at 11:15, and we will see you then. Welcome back from break, everyone. We appreciate you coming back on time. And today, for this next session, we have Terry Orden, who will be presenting to you, and she is our Executive Director of Program Efficiencies. Welcome, Terry Orden.
Good morning. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Oop, okay, so good morning.
Welcome back from break, everyone. We appreciate you coming back on time. And today, for this next session, we have Terry Orden, who will be presenting to you, and she is our Executive Director of Program Efficiency.
I'm getting
Welcome, Terry Orden.
little bit of feedback. I just need to
Good
close.
morning. I'm going to start by sharing my screen.
Okay.
So, welcome back from break, everyone. We appreciate you coming back on time. And today, for this next session, we have Terry Orden.
All right, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm just getting feedback from the presentation.
Welcome, Terry Orden.
Little bit of feedback. I just need to close. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what is the problem. Okay, now it's gone. We will start again. Okay. So good morning, Rochester administrators, teachers, and staff. My name is Terry Orden. As Severia mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Program Efficiencies. Over the next hour, I will share a brief review of scheduling, followed by Betsy Hoffer, our Associate Director of Attendance, giving an in-depth overview of attendance. And finally, Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Janelle Morris, will wrap up our presentation with information on grading. Then, as time permits, we will answer as many questions as possible. So moving right into a brief review of schedules for the opening of the 2021 school year. As it has been shared in our reopening plan, elementary grades are on a universal time schedule of 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. with our secondary grades starting just a little earlier at 8:30 p.m. and also concluding their day at 8:30 a.m. and concluding their day at 3:30 p.m. During remote learning, we are following the rotation of every Monday as an A day, Tuesday is a B day, Thursday is a C day, and Friday is a D day. Wednesday is our asynchronous learning day and will not necessarily have synchronous times with students. However, attendance will still need to be inputted on Wednesdays, and Betsy is going to discuss this in greater detail in just a couple of minutes. If you have trouble entering attendance on any day for any reason, please reach out to the clerical in your building for assistance. We want to be sure that we are recording attendance as accurately as possible every day of the week. October 8th is still a half day for our students as indicated on the updated calendar approved in August by the Board of Education. Further details of this day will be forthcoming. And then finally, marking period dates. So I wanted to share a reminder of these dates. The first marking period ends on November 13th. And grades will be due in Power Teacher Pro before November 18th, as traditionally done in the past. Dr. Morris will be discussing grading further later on in the presentation. And as always, directions for grading will be shared as well. Now we will move into the attendance overview with Betsy Hoffer.
Good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to meet with you today to let you know about some of the updates that have to do with attendance, especially in remote learning. So we're going to talk about attendance today from 3 different perspectives. Our legal responsibilities, technically how to take attendance, and of course the moral implications of taking attendance accurately and timely. It's the state law that we take attendance accurately and timely. It's the expectation that all teachers record attendance. And while that was put on pause after March 13th, the guidance that was released from New York State in July is that all teachers are expected to take attendance and all students are expected to attend daily. And of course, our attendance records need to be accurate. And I am very pleased to say that over the past couple of years, the way that our teachers have taken attendance has been outstanding. We have had an increase of teachers recording attendance accurately and timely every day. And that is expected to continue even during this unusual situation with remote learning. So our guidance for Rochester is based on what was told to us by the New York State Department of Education. And I just want to read this to you because I think it's very important that it's understood. So students must attend instruction daily, even when that instruction is being provided in a remote learning environment. Daily attendance will be taken in PowerSchool by each teacher for each class at the secondary level and every day at the elementary level by the child's teacher. Teachers and students are expected to engage in substantial daily interaction, teacher to student, student to teacher. I think this next part is very important. Administration will support teachers and families relative to student engagement with remote learning protocols and expectations, including regular attendance and work completion. Building plans will reflect how each school-based team will monitor, support, and develop plans to assist students that struggle with attendance and chronic absenteeism. So now, since July, the state has said we do have to take attendance daily, and chronic absenteeism will continue to be a metric that we will be held accountable for. It's important that we, can you go back, Terry? Thanks. So this is very different. This is a shift. And I think it's very important that we take into consideration families that may have young children with parents who are essential workers and working during the day, that they will have to perhaps complete work later on in the day, but still get credit for attending asynchronously. We also have older students who may be taking care of younger students or who may be working to support families. And so this guidance from the state will help us to meet the needs of our families who may be struggling during this difficult time. Thanks, Terry. So what are our expectations? Attendance will still default to unsubmitted, and robocalls will not go out until a teacher marks a child absent unexcused. While we're expecting that teachers will continue the present past protocols of recording attendance within the first 15 minutes of class, we understand that especially next week, it may take some getting used to and some training on how to do that with running the class. I think the emphasis should be put on engaging students who are present synchronously and recording attendance as soon as possible and looking for support from or other staff members to figure out how to record attendance as soon as possible. Robocalls will go out as soon as a child is marked absent unexcused. So the first robocall will go out an hour after school starts, and there will be 2 follow-up robocalls, one delivered in the middle of the day and one at the end of the school day. This is a gentle reminder to families that we are expecting students to attend and engage, and if parents are unaware that a child is not engaging, to help them redirect the student. When children are not engaging or not appearing remotely, school personnel are expected to reach out to families daily. And one of the big things that's a change is how teachers can change attendance. So PowerSchool will be open and teachers can change attendance to change it from absent unexcused to present asynchronous after contact has been made with the family. Since some of this attendance will be updated on a regular basis, I'm asking that school offices send attendance letters weekly rather than daily. So what does present look like? There's going to be 3 present codes in PowerSchool. One is present synchronous, present sync, and that is when a child is attending an online class like we're doing right now, or participated in a teacher's office hours. And tardy excused and unexcused are still options that you can use to record attendance. Present async is when a child is completing work at a time that is not the scheduled class time, that there's a daily check-in, some kind of two-way communication with the student or the family, that contact was made with the student and perhaps they were working on schoolwork, but there were technical difficulties, and that a child has completed their daily assignments either online or offline. All of those things are present async. The present code, present P, that we've used in the past should not be used during remote learning. I believe that these three codes will help us to really understand engagement, whether it was synchronous or asynchronous, and I think it'll be important data to have as we move on to look to see how students are engaging and how we need to connect with them in a more impactful way. So absent, if a child is absent, it really will be on the school to try to connect with that child and make sure that there aren't any obstacles that are creating a problem for them to connect with us. And as I said earlier, the attendance can be changed from absent unexcused to present async. This next part I'm going to go over briefly, and it really is more of a technical aspect about attendance. And if you are new to taking attendance or need a refresher, this will be online and you can go back and use it as a resource moving forward. So our system is Power School. You can move forward, Terry. And you get to Power School with that icon on the launch pad. And this is a video that's provided by Power School. It's not our CSD, but it is Power School, and it will give you directions on how to take attendance. It's about a 5-minute video. And we're not going to go through that right now, but I want you to have this as a resource moving forward. Absences, and this is true for tardy as well. Excused absences, and these are the things that are going to most often happen during remote learning. So if a child is sick, if they have a dentist appointment or doctor's appointment, if there's out-of-town family death, the directions are there. Court appearances and religious observances are considered excused absences. Unexcused absences are oversleeping, family vacations, and all of those unexplained or undocumented absences. I saw the question came through about tardy. Tardy is the same thing. If a child is late to class because they had a doctor's appointment, that's an excused tardiness. And that is all in the manual, which will be available. All of this information, it's really important to document in attend actions or attendance interventions. This is considered to be our way to communicate with each other about how kids, communication from parents. But I want to just caution people that we need to maintain discretion. If there is a concern a parent tells you about, you need to make sure that you are saying something to the effect of parent has concern, will connect with social worker. But please don't go into any confidential details because that's not allowed. And it is a legal document and it has been used in the past in courts. The attendance oath will be available to you also for the end of each marking period. Teachers will need to record that, yes, their attendance is accurate. And that will probably be sent to you much the same way that we did in the spring with a Google link or paper for you to sign. And there are directions here. This is also an active link that you can click on for how to use attendance interventions. And I think probably this for me is the most important reason why we are so concerned about attendance, because especially during the school closure, we saw that a lot of inequities were very visible, and absenteeism is like the first red flag that is shown to let us know that something is going on, that we need to reach out to the family and make sure that we're connecting with them and providing all the supports possible to re-engage the student and the family, so that students will have an opportunity to be in school and be successful in the future. So these are the 4 goals that my team will be working on this year, hoping to contact families and maintain updated addresses and phone numbers. And I saw a question came up earlier for that. Teachers do not have permission to change contact information in PowerSchool, but school clerical do. So please work with your clerical. I know that we all have phone numbers and texts and email addresses. If we can get those into PowerSchool, that will make our system more robust, and we will be able to connect with families in a much better ability. The other things about connectivity, my team has been very helpful with making sure that Chromebooks have been deployed, and we want to make sure that we're connecting with students. And of course, relationships and engagement through participation is really important because it will have an effect on ongoing academic achievement. Any questions? I'm happy to work with you and your principal, your school chief, because I know that this is going to be all new. I want you to know that we're here for you to help figure out some of this. And as everyone else said, you know, patience and flexibility are going to be key during this time. And I appreciate all of your questions as we figure out this shift in attendance. There's my email address. Feel free to contact me at any time. And I'd like to turn it over now to Dr. Morris.
Good morning, everyone. So I just want to give everybody a general discussion overview about grading in the virtual learning model that we're about to embark on. This information I'm presenting to you now is also contained in our academic reopening plan, which is located on our website. So the Rochester district will return to a variation of our pre-pandemic grading policy. So we plan to use our traditional grading system that we've used prior to the COVID epidemic, and we want to implement that this semester and beyond. So while we anticipate we will have to revise our grading system in certain areas, we want to make sure that there is a solid framework in place that's going to allow us to reflect our students' work, their learning, and their progress. So there may be necessity for the adjustments to the weights of some of the different components. So for example, if you're using formative or summative assessments, waiting for homework and classroom work as well, that we are suggesting for the time that we are doing virtual learning. So if you see this chart on your screen right now, what we are suggesting is while we are returning back to our traditional grading methodology for our students in their classes, there would be weighting attributed to the type of work that you're collecting from our students. And so in terms of assessment, if you're using assessment, we have different types of assessment that you could be using with your students. We're asking that 70% of your students' work that is used on testing could be attributed towards their grade. Now remember, these are in addition to the grading methodology that you are using in your classroom that will be closely aligned to what you used prior to the pandemic closure. So keeping this in mind, that the proportion of formative versus summative assessment would be determined by what grade level and what subject area that you are using in the content within it. Additionally, you will have classwork, you will have participation and homework that you're going to be assigning to your students. And so the classroom work is any type of written work or oral work that you will collect from your students in a classroom. And this is different from homework. So then you also look at the participation. So how your students are being engaged in your classroom in a virtual environment. And then lastly, any type of homework. So these types of assignments or work that you're collecting or measures of engagement, we are suggesting that you would use 30% of the weight of the grade for that. Now, once again, the evaluation of this can be done in both asynchronous and synchronous environments. And this way you can allow for differentiation of your formative assessment in your classroom work to be determined based on the fact that this is all being delivered virtually. So our overall expectation is that since grading practices are returning to normal, our students should be expected to complete their assignments and seek help as needed from you as their teachers. But we would expect that the grading methodologies and the protocols that you've used prior to the COVID emergency would be resumed at this time for your students. And the suggested weighting is for you to allow for adjustment for the virtual learning model. Thank you. So any questions about the reopening plan in terms of grading? This chart that I just shared with you, as well as the recommendations in terms of language for grading methodology, has been published in the academic reopening plan, and we would be more than happy to answer questions that you may have relating to grading or any of the other topics that we've discussed. Thank you.
So there are a few questions that have come up, and I will go ahead and read the questions so that the three of you may answer them for whatever respective area. The first question, can the district provide some information about intervention and the expectations of intervention teachers while teaching remotely?
I'm wondering if this is specific to attendance interventions. Betsy, do you want to speak a little bit more to where we can find that information?
If you take a look at the PowerPoint about attendance interventions, it lists out all the possible choices, such as phone calls. The office will be taking care of letters home, and offering resources to families that may need some additional assistance. There's a drop-down menu on PowerSchool that lists, I think there's about 10 different possible interventions there.
Next one, ESL teachers that push in only, do they have to take attendance?
So I can take this one. This ESL teachers are listed as a co-teacher with the lead teacher. So it is the responsibility of the lead teacher to take attendance. However, they can assist in that process being a co-teacher on that section.
Special teachers are teaching by way of Zoom into the classroom, teacher Zoom. Do we need to also take attendance?
So for elementary school teachers in the special areas, art, music, library, PE, yes, they are required to take attendance, but homeroom teachers will only be required to take attendance once a day.
And just to piggyback on that, secondary teachers, yes, will also have to take attendance in the areas of the specials.
So this is part of the specials as well. It says, how will CTRR SPED teachers report attendance for students? If they do not attend Zoom meetings for resource services, do we mark them absent?
So if you have a section for resource room on your schedule, then and you do not see the student, then yes, you would have to mark them absent. If they're receiving OT, PT, speech services, then that teacher should be listed on the section and they would report the attendance.
If a student has the opportunity to be present for the day by doing this work until the end of the day, how will doing attendance at beginning of the day be helpful?
So at the beginning of the day, we want to know who is engaged with us remotely. And so by recording them present sync, we know who is engaging in the remote learning environments.
Will TAs have access to PowerSchool to be able to update attendance?
Yes, as long as principals and administrators give that recommendation or that need, we can add TAs into a section to assist with attendance.
What is considered tardy, excused versus unexcused?
So tardy, unexcused would be something like showing up but not really having a reason for being late, such as they overslept, something like that. Tardy excused would be that they got to the remote learning environment late because they had a doctor's appointment or some other excused reason why they couldn't attend right from the beginning of class.
Does a student turning in work count as attendance?
Yes.
It counts as present asynchronous.
Okay.
Kind of the rule of thumb that I keep is if we see the student virtually somehow, some way, then it's a present synchronous. If the student submits work or does work outside, or there were connectivity issues or there's things of that, then it's present asynchronous.
Will there be robocalls for pre-K?
I think we'd have to check with Robin Hooper on that. I'm not exactly sure.
What if a child only logs in one time during the day? Teachers cannot be expected to call families daily.
So if a child logs in once a day, in the grand scheme of things for PowerSchool, they are marked present for the day. And I believe that schools have come up with their building attendance plans, which will be explained later on in this week, and have come up with protocols for how to reach out. Certainly, we found out over the past year or so, teachers don't want, especially over during the closure, parents do not want to hear from 8 different teachers a day. They would prefer to have one phone call or one form of communication, whether it's texting or email. And so schools have come up with plans on how to address that.
Question is, what if the student does both synchronous and asynchronous? Do we just pick one?
So if teachers see the children during the scheduled times, that is synchronous. And that would be the only thing that you would record for that period for the day.
And these codes need to be entered in the first 15 minutes of the day?
So as much as possible. I realize that may be asking a lot, especially as we all get back to this whole and learning about this remote learning environment. If you can toggle between Google Classroom and PowerSchool, wonderful. If you can't, class periods are a little bit shorter than regularly during the regular school year. As soon as possible is what we're asking for. We certainly want to try to adhere to our past practices as much as possible, but this is a time where we are all going to be flexible and patient and move forward as best as we can. I think everyone is experiencing some anxiety, and we certainly don't want to make this worse.
What happens if a student logs on in the beginning, but then does not come on for later Zooms? And do we have to change the attendance?
So if a child appears once during the class period, that is present. I certainly, as a teacher, would want to reach out to the family and to the parent to see what's going on, because there's going to be a loss of learning if they're not engaged. But in the attendance world, if they've appeared once, they're present. And then it becomes an issue around instruction and engagement.
When do they have to send work for it to be considered present asynchronous? Is there a time limitation for it to be considered that day?
they can turn it in. Basically, the rules are very flexible. I would say they could turn it in at any time, but I think that as time goes on, we're going to have to see how things are going. There may be further guidance around that, but for right now, we're accepting all work when it comes in and marking it present asynchronous.
So if I call a student and they tell me they don't feel like coming to class or doing homework, I have to mark them present because we had an interaction?
I would talk to your principal and ask for further guidance on that. I would mark them present asynchronous in the meantime. But if this is an ongoing concern, I certainly think that we need to talk to the family about the situation, because we certainly want kids to be engaged with learning. There may be other things that are going on that a counselor or a social worker needs to reach out to the family and help put some supports in place. This is a time where we're being given a great deal of flexibility and support from the state, and we want to try to extend that to our families as well.
What's acceptable notice of absences, such as email, text messaging, etc.?
All of those are appropriate. Any kind of communication from the parents about why a child is not attending. And certainly if you can mark a child absent excused, that will stop any robocall, which I know parents appreciate for communication reasons.
What about attendance on Wednesdays? Will we mark the student present asynchronous in the first 15 minutes?
Terry, I sent you a text. I think that this really has to do with our SEL on Wednesdays and how attendance is connected. So Terry, I don't know if you could speak to that.
So we can look into this further, only because if schools opt to do their morning PD sessions, do PD sessions in the morning and then have contact with students in the afternoon, then we would have to give that leeway in order for teachers to input attendance. So we will revisit this and get more information out to you. Great question.
In the past, it has been the office responsibility to change attendance to excuse based on the parent notification. Is this now added to the teacher responsibility?
If the teacher knows that a child is absent excused when they're recording attendance, then absolutely they should put that in there. If a parent communicates with the office staff, then the office staff would record it.
Is a child being at daycare an excused absence?
If we know ahead of time that the child is at daycare and connect during the day remotely, then yes, it would be an excused absence. But once that work is submitted, then it would change to present asynchronous.
Who will take attendance if a teacher is out since there are no subs?
That question came up this morning, and we will be referring that back to schools and the school chiefs for guidance.
Secondary teachers see upwards of 150 students a day. If a third are absent, that's 50 phone calls or emails each day. How do we do that in a timely manner?
So I think I kind of answered this previously when I said the schools are coming up with their own plans about how we'll be reaching out to families, because families do not want to have 8 different phone calls or emails. And so that will be discussed more during school plans later on in the week.
Whose responsibility is it to reach out to families with chronic attendance issues? Who do teachers contact if we are unsuccessful in reaching families?
So all schools have attendance teams, and they're kind of attendance/engagement teams that will be meeting on a regular basis. So referrals can be, and my team and I will be meeting with them to discuss possible ways to reach out to families and offer supports. So I would expect the same thing would happen, that a teacher who has a concern about a child who isn't engaged at all, a referral will be made to the school attendance team so we can delve into that deeper.
Can you address preschool attendance?
No, I can't. that would be something that Robin Hooper would have to address.
Who do we contact if students are not attending and logging in?
Well, first you reach out to the family, and then if there's no engagement from the family, you would reach out to the school attendance team, and I would work with them to try to ascertain what's happening.
And just to piggyback on that response, so if we're entering in the absent unexcused, a robocall will be triggered. So as long as the contact information is correct in the system, then that initial call will be made.
When will be expected to change the unexcused absence to present asynchronous?
The classroom teacher, although during SEL, there may be some other people who have access to attendance based on having smaller groups of students together. So that's really the registrar and school-based question.
So the other part to that was if they do the schoolwork after hours, do they have to go back after school hours and fix it? Or can it be?
Teachers will have open access to make changes in attendance, so they don't have to do it that evening. They could do it the next day, but as soon as possible is what's recommended.
If parents are helping students complete assignments, how do teachers grade them?
So in normal situations, the expectation is that when students are home and they need assistance with their homework, they frequently will ask their parents or guardians to assist them with their homework. We would ask that in this scenario, in a virtual learning environment, that you once again grade the assessment or the assignment as you would in any other situation, fully knowing that in some situations, as you had in the past, students will reach out for assistance with work if they need assistance and seeking help from their parents and guardians. So the expectation is that you would grade the assignment as you would in any other situation.
During the pandemic, we were given guidelines as to how much we should be assigning asynchronously to the students for each grade band. Are there limits as to how much we can assign?
So we have guidelines about the distribution of asynchronous and synchronous work in our re-entry plan that is posted and has been distributed. And we ask that we, for across the district, that we align our teaching and our delivery of instruction to those distributions that we put in the reopening plan.
Dr. Morris, might it be helpful if you give a link in case folks have not, our staff have not seen that in the chat, that that can be distributed so folks know exactly where to go get that information?
Yes, I can get that now.
Thank you.
And that link will be provided in the streaming on YouTube shortly.
Great, thank you.
How will resource teachers get the students out of class for their services?
So that's an interesting question. Depending upon how we set this up at the school level, they do have the sections where they can take attendance. So resource teachers could send out their own individualized Zoom link for students. Or if they're all coming from one classroom, the teacher can pair with the homeroom teacher and kind of do a breakout session, do a breakout room with that resource teacher and put them on as a co-host so that that can happen. So there's multiple ways that we can handle that within the system right now and within the virtual learning. So really it's going to be a school by school decision on how we decide to do that, if you compare with the teacher or if you need to do a separate link.
For special teachers, what if our power school doesn't match our schedule? How do we take attendance?
So with the difference of scheduling, if there is an issue with the class period not lining up due to how we've modified schedules, I would reach out to clerical to make sure that the student is marked present on that day. So that's where clerical in the building can override the attendance. And I'm more concerned right now if the issue is I only showed up for specials. So we know in a school day, if a student doesn't show up until 8th period and we mark them present that 8th period, they are marked present over that if the student shows up, that they are marked present. And again, schools can work on different formulas and different ways to handle this. But right now, if you're not matching the A, B, C, D day, then I would reach out to clerical to make sure that that student has a present code for that day.
Are we looking at 30% for grading and 10% classwork, 10% homework, and 10% participation?
That's one way you can distribute the grading as you collect the work. We're trying to encourage that more weighting would go on testing, which you would collect a wider range of information about the student's progress. But if you decide in your grading methodology to give 10% to each one of those areas of work that you collect, that is fine. Just allowing for that 30% distribution of grading for classwork, homework, and the other work that you would assign within your classroom, including engagement.
What assessments are we giving in the beginning of the year in WA, Ames Web, etc.? Are we all doing our own thing to group students academically, or will there be district assessments?
So more information about the district-wide expectation for assessments formatively will be distributed to schools. Additionally, there will be additional information that you will receive over the next 4 days that will also allow more definition about assessment expectations depending on content area, grade level, and subject. So I would ask that you, when you get in your clusters as the days go along, you will be given more information about assessments.
What kind of communications have been sent to our students and parents regarding academic expectations with remote learning?
So I don't mind jumping in on this one as a parent. I will say that I've received information from my principal and my classroom teacher regarding what is expected of the day. And then I'm sorry, Dr. Morris, I'll defer to you for further information.
So we have several things that we're doing to try and make sure that we connect with parents and allow students and parents to understand what the expectations are in terms of remote learning. So some of the things that we are doing included the parent forums that we've already conducted. We are publishing the plan with our expectations for academics and remote learning. We have a back to school guide that will be distributed shortly, which will also discuss in detail some of the pertinent information that is required to be successful in a remote environment, but also distilling it in a way that is more parent friendly for our families. And also we're providing translations for those communications as well. We're also encouraging schools to have sessions such as open houses virtually, where they can also connect with families and emphasize the importance of the remote learning environment and how to make sure that our academic expectations are expressed and met in that environment. So these are just some of the things that we're doing. We will make sure that we continue to maintain communication and post information for parents and families on our website as well, and utilize social networking where possible to make sure that our message gets out.
If a student contacts us and turns in work overnight, does that count as previous day attendance or current day attendance because many high schoolers work overnight?
It is associated with the day that the assignment was given or was due.
Will classroom teachers log off when their class goes to specials?
So again, I feel that that's a building-based decision. Either schools can opt, I mean, depending upon the grade level of the student, teachers and principals, administrators may choose to add that special teacher as a co-host to the kindergarten section that day, and then just have the students not have to sign into another Zoom link. So that's a scenario that I would defer back to buildings to decide how they're going to handle it.
If a student completes 4 days of work on a Friday, can we change the attendance from the previous Monday?
Yes, teachers will have access to make changes and update attendance.
And what is the purpose of A through D day schedule? Is this the special schedule?
Yes, for the most part, those are the schedules. We don't have any, there's one or two schools that do an AC day math class, like they block the schedule out. But yes, specifically it is most specials and then intervention services and again, classes that meet 0.5 or every other day. That's the purpose of the A through D.
What if families cannot log in until later times in the day for a scheduled Zoom meeting?
As long as there's evidence that the child participated, then that is considered present async.
When recording grades for the marking period, will students be marked accordingly if they are not completing assignments?
Yes, it is our expectation that since grading practices are returning to normal, if a student does not turn in an assignment, you would grade that assignment accordingly.
Two-part question. What if a household doesn't have Wi-Fi for their Chromebooks? And when will the last of the Chromebooks arrive?
So one of the jobs of my team in reaching out is to find if a family doesn't have access, and we'll make that connection so that they can get access. We certainly want to know that as soon as possible. And Glenn Vanderwater would have to answer the last question about when Chromebooks are coming.
What about translation for phone calls to parents who don't speak English?
Mm-hmm. So we have requested that, and that it will be put in place. I know that some of the translators are coming back this week as well, so that will have to be accomplished this week before robocalls start.
And if there is a Zoom bomber where a student shares the link with someone outside of the district, how do we handle that?
So what we will do is make sure that the guidelines for online learning and safety are securely shared across the district in terms of what to do to secure your learning environment against these types of incidences, but what to do as a response if something like this inadvertently happens.
And just to add to that response, there still is the waiting room. So even if a student shares the link with somebody outside of the classroom, then the teacher still has the authority or the wherewithal to not admit that student.
Will we still be following holidays, for example, Columbus Day, if we don't have school that day? Did we lose an A day, or does Tuesday become an A day?
So we will be following the calendar for holidays, and as right now we lose that A day. So we will keep it with A days are Mondays, Tuesdays are B days, Wednesdays asynchronous, Thursday C, and Friday D. Right now there's only a couple holidays in the first 10 weeks. As we review the process or review our learning model, if we move into a hybrid, if we move into in person, if we need to make adjustments to days, we will do that then.
Who gets the excuse for an excused absence?
So I would expect that if there is an email that could be forwarded to the office, that they could eventually just create a folder or print it off to put in the student's folder. Usually teachers hold on to those until the end of the year. So the other thing teachers can do is document it into attend actions or attend interventions, spoke to parent, child, at doctor's appointment. That can be done.
The last question, not sure if it was answered, but what will the grading policy be? A, B, C, D, or P, PD, or incomplete?
So as I mentioned before, you should align your instruction and your delivery of curriculum now with the prior method that you would have used to grade your work. So students, if they had been previously graded on an A, B, C, D scale, then that's what we would use now. We are resuming the regularly delivered methodology for grading from this point on. So if you would typically use A, B, C, D, then that's what you would use from this point forward. We're resuming the regular grading methodology.
And that was the last question. Any additional questions that may be asked, we will make sure that we include that on a document that will be sent out to the district. Dr. Myers-Small, would you like to have any words before we dismiss for lunch?
I just want to say thank you again to Betsy and Dr. Morris and Terry for providing information. I just would like to encourage folks, if you haven't already looked at that academic plan, I know the link was put in the chat and also live streamed on YouTube, but that plan is very comprehensive. It has everything from soup to nuts. It's very informative. They are constantly updating it as we get new information, so it is a fluid document, but make sure you take a look at that and look at that. And as Betsy shared, please don't forget to click on the link for the 2 videos that helps you maneuver through attendance. I think that is going to be incredibly helpful, so make sure you do that as well. And should you have additional questions, I think it's important to first start at your school, either an assistant principal or principal. And then if they can't help you, we'll move it up to the chief of schools, et cetera. But we'll do our best to be responsive. And I think the key thing, starting on September 14th, is we're being very, very flexible, and we'll get there. It's going to take a little bit of time. I know this is new for us, but we'll get there. And let's be patient with one another. Let's be patient with our students as we continue to move forward. And it's it's just never a good position when you stand between people in lunch. So I am done talking.
So at this time, we are about to dismiss for lunch. Just as a reminder, when you return for the afternoon session, please select the PM link that is on the landing page to enter into the next session. And remember to complete your survey that will be sent out to all emails during lunch. We appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you shortly. We will be back at 1:15 promptly.